Let me tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was teaching a group of 8 and 9-year-olds. I walked into the classroom and one of my students, Rui, was hiding under the table. As soon as I called his name, Rui, the whole class chimed in with, "What are you doing?" They had the intonation and the stress exactly right, and they sounded just like me. That's implicit learning in action. They'd heard me use that phrase so often that it became part of their own language. And yes, this was the 90s, in a very small school, so children being left alone in the room for 2 minutes before their lesson wasn't unusual. When I thought about it later, I realised, if nothing else, at least the whole class had already internalised the present continuous, and they knew how to use it in context. Coincidentally, the following week we were due to learn the present continuous, so I used that moment. I broke the phrase down with them, doing with the ing ending, the verb to be changing to match the subject, and the word order for a question. And because they had Rui, what are you doing, as a real example, it was a perfect reference point. That's the power of combining implicit learning with explicit noticing. My name's Jane Maria Harding de Rosa, an English language teacher and trainer, a CELTA Delta tutor with a Master's in Teaching English to Young Learners. I've got a PGCE in primary education and over 30 years of classroom experience. They'll just pick it up. Yes, immersion helps. You'll hear learners chatting in the playground, and they often pick up phrases like, "Can I go to the toilet?" or "How are you doing?" without ever being formally taught them. That's implicit learning. But when you sit down and explain something like how the past tense is formed or how it's used in context, that's explicit learning. Both are vital for EAL learners, but they work in different ways. Implicit learning happens without direct instruction. Learners absorb vocabulary and grammar and patterns through exposure and repetition and meaningful interaction. Explicit learning is direct. We highlight forms. We ask learners to consciously practice them. But explicit learning doesn't mean we stand at the front and list grammar rules. The most powerful explicit learning happens when we guide learners to notice the patterns for themselves, whether it's how the ED endings sound in speech or how a science textbook structures an explanation. This is sometimes called guided discovery. Implicit learning helps learners develop BICS, the social English they need for day-to-day interactions. That's why many EAL learners sound fluent in conversation within a year or two. But CALP, the academic English they need to write essays, understand textbooks, or take exams, that usually takes much longer, and it requires more explicit support with vocabulary, structures, and strategies. So when we balance implicit and explicit learning, we're really supporting both sides, the social language and the academic language. Most of our everyday fluency, knowing what it sounds right or what feels right, comes from implicit learning. But in school, EAL learners also need explicit opportunities to succeed in academic English. Implicit learning builds conversational fluency, whereas explicit learning, especially noticing, supports academic success. Learners often acquire BICS through implicit learning, but for CALP, teachers need to guide them to notice how language is used, spotting a grammar rule in a history text, or recognising how cause and effect is expressed in science. Here are some classroom examples. Implicit strategies include things like storytelling and repeated reading, chants, songs and games, or simply giving learners lots of meaningful input. Even your daily classroom instructions, like open your books or line up, build powerful implicit learning through repetition. For explicit strategies, I like to frame them as noticing opportunities. With sentence stems, you could try to elicit how sentences begin or notice the key verbs that are used. With collocations, look at the surrounding words and word order. And with grammar, Rather than giving rules first, show examples and ask learners to notice the patterns, perhaps colour coding them. So what works best? A balance. EAL learners find the space to absorb language and the scaffolding to notice how it works. Our role isn't just to tell learners the rules, it's to create opportunities where they see the patterns for themselves. That's where explicit learning becomes powerful. If this has got you thinking, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Which do you think your learners get more of right now? Implicit learning or explicit noticing? And if you'd like more strategies, don't forget to subscribe for weekly ideas on supporting EAL learners.